With no less than the fate of our democracy at stake, the 9 justices of the United States Supreme Court hold in their hands the power to forever alter the trajectory of our country. How they rule on cases having to do with January 6th, the violent attempt to disrupt the peaceful transfer of presidential power, will echo for generations. So not only is it reasonable for us to expect those 9 human beings to go about their process impartially, it's also vital that they are seen and perceived as being impartial humans. The mere appearance of bias could strain our trust in an honest result for these cases, which is why today's news isn't just disturbing, it's scary. The New York Times cites photos and interviews with neighbors in reporting that in 2021, days before President Joe Biden's inauguration as president, days after the deadly attack on the United States Capitol of January 6th, neighbors of conservative Justice Samuel Alito noticed something on his lawn, an upside-down American flag, a symbol commonly used in those days by Trump supporters who falsely suggested the election was stolen. A symbol of stop the steal, if you will. That flag flew in the Alito's yard, the front yard, as he and his fellow justices were contending with whether to hear a 2020 election case, an argument on which Alito would find himself on the losing end. In response to the New York Times seeking responses, Alito provided an emailed statement, quote, "I had no involvement whatsoever in the flying of the flag. It was briefly placed by, wait for it, Mrs. Alito, in response to a neighbor's use of objectionable and personally insulting language on yard signs." He blamed his wife. Sound familiar? Even if one accepts that at face value, we should ask ourselves, does it do anything to alleviate the perception of bias? That an anti-Trump lawn sign, a mean neighbor, was so personally insulting to Mrs. Alito that the only recourse they had as a Supreme Court justice and that justice's wife was to fly the Stop the Steal symbol, brandished by some January 6 rioters who attacked the Capitol 1 week before in a widely televised insurrection? Again, with not 1, but 2 January 6-related cases looming still, the first on presidential immunity, the other on the fate of a statute used to serve felony obstruction charges on hundreds who attacked the Capitol, the Supreme Court must now consider how far their new code of conduct goes, who it applies to, on the topic of disqualification. Quote, "A justice should disqualify himself or herself in a proceeding in which the justice's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. That is where an unbiased and reasonable person who is aware of all relevant circumstances would doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties." In response to the New York Times report, Senator Dick Durbin, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, called on Alito to recuse himself from cases related to the insurrection and for the court to adopt a binding code of ethics. Another member of that committee, Senator Richard Blumenthal, who will be our guest in a few minutes, echoed that sentiment this morning on Morning Joe.
Justice Alito should not sit on any of these cases involving Donald Trump. He ought to recuse himself. And here is the challenge to Chief Justice Roberts. The United States Supreme Court's credibility is plummeting.
All-time low.
Completely.
Lower than perhaps even the United States Congress, and that's saying something. Mm-hmm. And it is due to the Supreme Court's own self-inflicted wounds. Alito and Thomas directly involved in the January 6th insurrection. Now they're going to sit on cases involving pivotal legal questions. Absolutely unthinkable.
And yet here we are. So how the Supreme Court will ultimately come down on the January 6 cases is unclear. Nobody knows. But even now, before the justices have made public their decisions, the American people have a legitimate reason to be concerned, to have doubt that the court will make a decision in an entirely impartial manner. It's where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Senior editor for Slate and the host of the Amicus podcast, Dahlia Lithwick, is back. Plus, former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy, is back. With us at the table for the hour, former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here. Dahlia, this is a story that doesn't pack a lot of surprises when it comes to Alito and Thomas, a story that ProPublica won a Pulitzer for their extraordinary body of reporting, is a story that stopped me in my tracks last night when I saw the New York Times break this, and with the photo that has an image that, if you love this country, is like a body blow to see the image. And then after I saw the image, I read the story, and to learn that it flew over the house on the front lawn of one of 9 human beings who make up the United States Supreme Court is, to me, an epic scandal.
I mean, I think it's a scandal. I also think we're going to make a huge category error if we hyper-focus on the Sam Alito is a mean, bitter man who gets in fights with his neighbors, because I think it takes away from the institutional story that we have to focus on, that Senator Blumenthal focused on, which is how is it possible that there is a Supreme Court in which not 1 but 2 now justices have materially evinced positions in support of something that looks like Stop the Steal, something that looks like sympathy for the claim that the election was stolen, and that there is no mechanism whatsoever other than their own goodwill unto themselves to stop them. And I think that what's shocking about this story isn't so much that it kind of looks like the Alitos should have done what the rest of us do when we fight with our neighbors, which is like trim their rose bushes in the dark of night. But that's not the story. The story is that yet again, we have 2 justices who are sitting on cases, 1 already decided, Anderson, the Colorado case, 2 pending, as you said. And the only mechanism that the public has is to be angry and upset. That just can't be the end of the story.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Weissman, that he's a bad neighbor is the least shocking part of the story, right? And that a fight with a neighbor, that your instinct is to side with the insurrectionists, is the rot.
Yeah, so first, let's just leave aside the story. I mean, you don't have to be a former prosecutor to just pick that apart. And I would say, thank God there was a photo, because if there wasn't a photo, the story would be, it didn't happen. So there's a million ways that the cover story is absurd in the way that
Mrs. Alito did it?
Yeah, and it's just like the responses to the ProPublica stuff. I mean, the responses made you just think these are the people who are deciding to overturn Roe versus Wade. I want to go to Dahlia's point, because I think it's absolutely the right one. If you want to connect the image that you saw, you don't have to look far. If you look at what Alito said in the immunity argument, the argument was, should a president be subject to the criminal laws? And it was unbelievable. Somebody who was a U.S. attorney who is now sitting in the Supreme Court of the United States took the position, we cannot trust DOJ. We cannot trust a grand jury of citizens. We cannot trust the criminal justice system, which, by the way, he oversees the constitutional limits on what the government can do. We can't trust that, and that's why a president should be immune. And you tie that now to what you're seeing. This is a direct line in terms of what he espoused in the oral argument to the image that you are seeing. This is not like, oh, his wife just happened to be doing something, because you can tie it to his rhetoric and what his position is in the court.
Tim Heaphy, talk about this image. I mean, I saw it and immediately remembered it because I sat here and anchored hours of live television on January 6th, and I was staring at what the insurrectionists were carrying. A lot of them were carrying Trump flags, which is the first image that I had, but a lot of them carried this image of the flag upside down. There it is. I had to Google it on that day. I didn't know what that meant, but this is in the view of the insurrectionists. These are insurrectionists waving this flag. This was their symbol that day. This was the symbol Mrs. Alito, according to Justice Alito, if you even believe him at this point, decided to hang on her front lawn.
Right, Nicole, absolutely. It is one of the symbols that a lot of the rioters used to demonstrate their belief that the system was inverted, that the outcome was inverted, right? The symbolism here is that American ideals have been turned upside down, that the wrong person is being installed as president because all of this fraud has somehow gone undetected. Completely bogus, factually no foundation for that argument, but that's what the sort of symbol of the inverted flag means. And it was on display quite prominently at the Capitol on January 6th, which means there's no question that whomever made the decision to put that flag up in front of Justice Alito's house 11 days later was willingly associating with the insurrectionists, with this notion that the outcome was somehow inverted. To me, it doesn't matter who made the decision. It raises a very clear appearance issue, right? If a Supreme Court justice who is making decisions that bear directly upon the legality of what happened on January 6th, the solemnity of our democracy in the election, has evidence that that belief with that symbol, it, at the very least, raises an issue of appearance, of bias, of conflict, of impropriety. And that is why the rules not just say actual conflict, they say appearance of a conflict, which clearly calls for recusal.